The rain fell in sheets across the manicured grounds of the Westbrook estate, drumming against the stone pathways and turning the carefully tended gardens into a watercolor of grays and greens. Inside the modern glass and steel mansion, Daniel Westbrook stood at his home office window, watching the storm with the detached interest of someone who had insulated himself from life's discomforts. At T41, Daniel had everything success was supposed to bring: a technology company worth hundreds of millions, a house featured in architectural magazines, and investments that grew while he slept. But what he did not have was anyone to share it with. After his divorce 5 years ago, he had convinced himself that solitude was preferable to the complications of human connection. Then came the knock, so faint he almost missed it beneath the sound of the rain. Daniel frowned, checking his watch. It was nearly 9 in the evening, and he was not expecting anyone. His housekeeper had left hours ago, and deliveries did not come this late to his gated community. The knocking came again, more urgent this time. Daniel set down his tablet with a sigh of annoyance and walked through his gleaming, empty house to the front entrance, already composing the polite dismissal he would give to whatever solicitor had managed to get past security. But when he opened the door, the words died in his throat. A little girl stood on his doorstep, soaked to the skin. She could not have been more than 5 years old, with auburn hair plastered to her head and pink pigtails drooping sadly. She wore a pink flowered dress and a beige cardigan that clung wetly to her small frame, and her feet were bare, covered in mud and scratches. But it was her eyes that stopped Daniel's breath, huge, terrified, and filled with tears that mixed with the rain on her cheeks. "Please," the child said, her voice breaking on a sob. "Please help us. They hurt my mom. She's dying." Daniel stood frozen, struggling to process what he was seeing. This could not be real. Children did not appear on doorsteps in storms, begging for help like something out of a movie. But the little girl's terror was absolutely real, as were the muddy footprints on his pristine stone entry. "Where is your mother?" Daniel managed to ask. "In the woods," the girl said, pointing toward the tree line that bordered his property. "She told me to run and find help. There were bad men and they hurt her. And there's blood. And she won't wake up all the way." The words tumbled out in a rush, and Daniel felt something crack through the careful walls he had built around himself. This child was in crisis, and she had come to him because his house was the first one she had found. "What's your name?" Daniel asked, crouching down to her level, feeling the rain soak through his shirt. "Emma," the little girl whispered. "Emma Foster. Please, you have to help my mommy. She needs a doctor." Daniel's mind raced through options. Call 911 first. Then find the mother. Get the child inside warm, safe. Move quickly but calmly, so he did not frighten her more. "Emma, I'm going to help your mother," Daniel said, keeping his voice steady. "But first, I need to call for an ambulance and the police. Can you come inside where it's dry?" Emma shook her head violently. "No, we have to go now. She's bleeding. She told me to find help fast." Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed 911 as he stepped back into his house, grabbing a jacket from the closet and his car keys. He gave the dispatcher his address and a rapid explanation as he led Emma through the house to the garage. "I'm going to find her," Daniel said into the phone. "Send police and ambulance to my location immediately. Child says there were assailants, possible assault. Victim injured in the woods behind my property." He hung up despite the dispatcher's protests that he should wait because Emma was already climbing into his Range Rover, her small body shaking with cold, fear, and desperate urgency. "Which direction?" Daniel asked as he started the vehicle. "That way." Emma pointed toward a service road that led to the woods. "We were camping near the creek. Mommy said it was safe there, but the men found us." Daniel drove as quickly as he dared on the muddy path, headlights cutting through the rain and darkness. Emma sat forward in her seat, straining against the seat belt he had buckled around her, eyes scanning the trees. "There!" she cried suddenly. "Stop! Stop!" Daniel slammed on the brakes, and Emma was out of the car before he could stop her, running into the darkness. He grabbed a flashlight from the emergency kit and followed, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the wet ground. The beam of his flashlight found them 30 yards into the woods. A woman lay motionless on the ground, her clothing torn and muddy, blood matting her blonde hair. Emma was kneeling beside her, shaking her shoulder and crying, "Mommy, wake up! I brought help! Mommy, please!" Daniel dropped to his knees beside them, first aid training from long ago flooding back. He checked the woman's pulse, weak but present. She had a gash on her head that was bleeding, bruises on her face and arms, and she was unconscious but breathing. "Emma, I need you to be very brave," Daniel said, shrugging off his jacket and laying it over the woman. "Your mommy is alive, but she's hurt. The ambulance is coming, but I need your help. Can you do that?" Emma nodded, her teeth chattering from cold and shock. "Tell me what happened," Daniel said gently, applying pressure to the wound with his handkerchief. "Can you remember?" Through stuttering sobs, Emma told him about living in their car after losing their apartment. Her mother had been trying to find work, but jobs were hard to come by. They had been sleeping in a camping area in the woods to stay hidden and safe. Tonight, two men had found them, demanding money. When her mother had nothing to give, they attacked her. "Mommy told me to run," Emma whispered. "She said to run and not look back. I saw your house with all the lights on. I thought someone nice must live there." Tears burned Daniel's eyes. This child had been living in the woods, had watched her mother be attacked, and had somehow found the courage to run through a storm to save her. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. Daniel stayed kneeling in the mud, maintaining pressure on the wound while Emma held her mother's hand and whispered that everything would be okay now. When the paramedics arrived, they worked quickly, loading the woman onto a stretcher. One EMT tried to separate Emma from her mother, but the little girl clung with desperate strength. "I'll stay with her," Daniel heard himself say. "I'll bring her to the hospital. She knows me now." The EMT looked doubtful, but a police officer nodded. "I'll escort them. We need statements anyway." At the hospital, Daniel sat in the emergency room waiting area with Emma wrapped in a blanket beside him, her small hand clutching his. A nurse had cleaned her cuts and given her warm clothes, but she refused to leave until she knew her mother was safe. After what felt like hours, a doctor appeared. "Emma Foster's family?" she called. Daniel stood, gently lifting Emma. "I'm here with her. Her mother, is she okay?" "She's going to be fine," the doctor said. Emma burst into tears of relief. Concussion, stitches, bruising. She was lucky. Another hour in that cold and we'd be having a different conversation. "She's asking for her daughter." They followed the doctor to a small room where the woman lay clean and bandaged, and four in her arm. Her eyes found Emma immediately, and she reached out with a trembling hand. "Baby," she whispered, her voice cracking. Emma climbed carefully onto the bed, and mother and daughter held each other, crying. "Thank you," the woman said to Daniel. "The nurses told me you helped us. Thank you for not turning her away. Anyone would have helped," Daniel said, though he knew it wasn't true. Not in neighborhoods like his, where people didn't open their doors to strangers. "I'm Sarah," she said softly. "Sarah Foster. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to," Daniel replied. "I'm just glad Emma found my house." A social worker arrived, asking about housing and family. Sarah explained quietly about the job she lost, the apartment she couldn't afford, and the shelters that were full or unsafe. Daniel listened and then, to his own surprise, said, "You can stay with me, just temporarily, until you get back on your feet. I have more space than I know what to do with. Emma can have her own room." Sarah blinked. "We can't accept that. You don't even know us." "I know your daughter ran through a storm to save your life," Daniel said. "I know you fought to protect her with everything you have. I know I can help and I want to." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "Why would you do this?" Daniel thought of his empty mansion, of years spent building walls, of Emma's knock in the rain. "Because Emma knocked on my door tonight," he said softly, "and I'm glad she did." 3 weeks later, Daniel returned home to find his house transformed. Music played in the kitchen, Sarah and Emma baking cookies. Drawings covered his refrigerator. Laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for years. Sarah had found a job at a local elementary school, saving for a place of her own. But Daniel found himself hoping she wouldn't leave too soon, that Emma's joy would stay. The men who attacked Sarah had been caught. She was healing. Emma's nightmares had faded into laughter. That evening, as they ate dinner together, Emma looked up at Daniel. Mr. Daniel, did you know you saved my mommy's life? I think you saved her life, Emma, he said. You were the brave one. But you opened the door, she said. Mommy says lots of people wouldn't have. She says you have a good heart. Daniel's throat tightened. He looked at Sarah, who smiled softly. You both gave me something too, he said quietly. You reminded me that having everything means nothing if you have no one to share it with. 6 months later, Sarah and Emma still lived in Daniel's house, not because they had nowhere else to go, but because they had become a family. Daniel had fallen in love with Sarah's strength, and Emma had stolen his heart completely. Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as interruptions, as unexpected knocks on the door during storms, as desperate pleas from small children who trust us to be better than we thought we could be. And sometimes, opening that door doesn't just save one life, it saves them all. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Emotional Top Story, where every story reminds us that kindness can change everything.